Welcome to Owen Sound, Ontario, a northern, southern, western Ontario town, if that makes any sense. But for those of you that live in Ontario, you'll know what I'm talking about. I don't know much about the history of this town. I'm not going to partake as an expert. I'm not going to partake as an expert of Owen Sound in any retrospect. So understandably, any of you that watch this video that say, you didn't get this right, you should probably take a tour. Well, that's just not what I have time for today. I'm just here for other reasons and discovering the town for the first time. And you guys will do it with me as I check out a couple of the main sites, including a couple waterfalls, an art gallery, and just the town itself, which has a fair amount of historical importance to the history of Ontario and Canada at large, as it was once one of the main port cities in Ontario. And now, as a pale shade of that's passed, which we're actually heading down 2nd Avenue currently, which will take us to the harbor, which was once one of the most bustling harbors in all of North America. But that was the history of the past. Let's check out Owen Sound today. But this town was really known as a port city. It was known as Little Chicago, oddly enough, because back in the day when this was a perfect cross-section of industries and ports, serving the Great Lakes region, you had unfortunate situations of sailors looking for a little bit of relief once they ported and got onto the shores. And there's a cool little section, well, it's not so cool, this is a notorious section of town that we're gonna hit just a little bit later that is infamous, which I found is very fascinating for debauchery and libations and just general, feral type of activity that caused this town to become a dry town for the better part of 70 years, even into like the 1970s, from if I read my history right. So much was the influence of alcohol and debauchery in this city that they decided that's enough of that, and they fully banned it for many years, many generations. Signs of that early history really don't exist in this town today, as it's completely no longer the bustling port that it was, say, over 100 years ago. Always got to give a shout out to my hospitable hosts for food, and that would be Papa's right behind me, or Papi's. Really nice little place, very quaint and small, but they have a nice happy hour and some excellent selection of beers that are local and a nice menu that is so much cheaper than what I'm used to, even in my home establishment in Toronto. So definitely recommend Papi's, check it out. I was told by Wikipedia that this town also was the original shooting location for a film by Disney called I'll Be Home for Christmas, which I haven't seen. Apparently this is the city hall that was used in that film itself. Nice brutalist building. You can't have a Canadian city, at least it calls itself a city with 20,000 people, without brutalism. And there's our representation. Well done, RBC, well done. Okay, this lady freaked me out because I thought that was a human being. definitely, if you are an art student like I was in Ontario, it's probably a rite of passage that you go into that gallery. It's a short visit, $10 donation, which I gladly accepted, and you get to see some cool Tom Thompson work, which for any of us that know the Group of Seven was definitely the coolest artist. Let's not kid ourselves. Well, there is Lauren Harris, there's Emily Carr, in fact, they were all cool. Even though art students would say, they put Canadian art way into the past, but I disagree. Actually, 100 years more onward, we're starting to see why those artists were actually as significant as they were in the past, and very reflective of, say, the times today as far as war and their reaction to global conflict and their interpretation through art of that. It may be a sordid curiosity, but for me it's fascinating, as this particular intersection that we approach here with a KFC and a Shell and a Circle K used to be one of the most raucous, rambunctious, and rowdy intersections in all of North America. 150 years ago, there was a pub on each corner of this intersection. In fact, you can kind of see this pub probably existed in this house still. There is no longer an establishment on this corner, although it looks like its surrounding fencing is still there. On this corner, there's no longer a pub. There's now a modern, well-ish KFC. And then on this corner as well, you have what comprises a 7-Eleven Shell that's being basically rebuilt. But at one point, this was the center of the city for debauchery, going out, 4 pubs in total, taverns, and of course the other type of establishment that starts with a B, associated to the later part of the evening, that sailors and journeymen and etc. would come here to unwind, let's say. It was a different time then, and it is certainly a different time now, as this place has no sight or no recollection of that notorious past. So much so that 70 odd years this town turned dry in order to correct, which was maybe a nightlife scene that was getting a bit out of control. Can't see any evidence of that now, but it's fascinating to know that this was once one of the beacons of nightlife in Ontario. This cargo ship here, I think, has been here as long as some of the people are just hanging out on the shore here, just, you know, listening to Rammstein in the background. Interesting community. It is a town of 20,000 people. It's really sparse, much like the farming community that I originally came from, which was only 18,000 back in the day. It is now 100,000. So yeah, this is definitely a picture of the past as far as the city is concerned in Ontario. Not too much disturbance, just a very cool vibe. I'm definitely enjoying it so far. That is Owen Sound as best as I could within about 2 hours. Give you a small idea of what this town is about. Now, I haven't been here during the night, which is really, unfortunately, for its history, or fortunate, depending on how you look at it, one of the biggest parts of its history. So maybe I'm due for another trip back here